Hey folks, Professor K here, and today we're going to learn about responsive CSS and media queries. So what is responsive CSS? It's basically CSS that reacts to different screen sizes or different situations. That's another way we can think about it. So I'm going to demo this today using media queries. And let's take a look at what we've got here. Here, I've just set up a really simple demo to help you think through layout. That's one of the biggest things that you have to think about with responsive CSS is how does my layout change from mobile to tablet to desktop? Here, I have two divs with the class of box1 and box2. Box1 has a black background, box2 has a gray background. And each one is going to have a height of 50 pixels. And if I change the width of this preview browser, it's always stacked like this. This is great in mobile, right? On a mobile view, this would be just absolutely fantastic. This is exactly what we're looking for, is stacked up and down, don't have to worry about text getting too squished. But as we get into the desktop view, let's say that this black bar is our content and this gray bar is our side navigation. We probably want this side navigation to show to the right. So we use media queries to change the way that these behave at larger sizes. Now, hopefully you've been writing your CSS mobile first to make this a lot easier. If not, you might have to kind of rethink and rejigger your CSS a little bit. But the basics of writing a media query are like this. You're always going to write @media. That just says for a certain type of media, in this case, screens. In fact, you can target all kinds of different media, including screens, print, televisions. There's all kinds of different things that you can target. But for right now, we're just going to work with screens. @media screen. And we're going to supply a second argument here. We want a certain type of screen, parentheses, to say what kind of argument it is. And we are going to put in min width. So at a certain width, a certain largeness, we're going to change our style. So let's say at a minimum width of 320 pixels, that's going to be just above mobile. We want to do something different. And at this minimum width of 320 pixels, we want this black background to only take up some of the space. And we want this gray background to take up 2/3 and 1/3. So I'm going to copy this CSS rule and put it inside my media query. Now, this isn't going to change anything just yet. We could even test this using a background of red just to see if it's applying. So here's 320, and then as we increase, it becomes red. So now we know this is applying, and we can think about, okay, how do I want to adjust this for my layout? So beginning at a small font size, I want my box to have a width of 66%, 2/3. So let's take a look at what that looks like. Expand, and the width changes. Cool. Now, to go along with this, we're going to need that same media query rule on box 2. And we're just going to copy and paste here. And for box 2, we want the width to be 33%. So let's see what that looks like. Oh, there we go, making progress. So from here, getting these to show up next to each other is a matter of choosing what kind of layout we want to use. The simplest one is floats. We can say all of our boxes should float left. So maybe we can write a little rule for that. Now, one thing that I like to do is I like to write my media queries inline. And that means putting the media queries next to the original style that they affect. So here, float left. If we increase, there we go. Now they're floating next to each other. Perfect. We could take a number of different approaches to layout, but let's just stick with the floats here. So let's refresh this on popcode. And now we can see that this is behaving just as we expect. Now maybe 320 pixels is too small. If I set my browser back to 0, that's Command 0 for the view, and I go down here, this is actually going to be really hard to read text if we had text in there. So I'm going to just get this back up here. And I want to change when this happens. I want to make this larger. So let's say that I think about this and I'm like, okay, Your usual values you can put in here are 320 pixels, 500 pixels, that's a small tablet, 768, that's a large tablet vertical, and then 1024, that's going to be a large tablet horizontal, or a small desktop. Those are the basic values that I like to work with. So I might say, okay, I really don't want this to happen until like a small tablet, or like a large tablet vertical. I don't want this to happen until 768. Now keep in mind, you're going to have to sort of keep track. Make sure these are all the same. Resize. And then I'm just going to pop this out in a new window. And now you can see this is only going to switch to this layout after there's actually enough room for some text to flow in. So this is right around 768 pixels. That's usually when I like to make the distinction between mobile and desktop. But it's up to you. Those are just starting values. You can put whatever you want into media queries. The other thing you can do is to combine all of your media queries and all your rules in a media query into one rule. So if you were thinking, okay, well, this seems a little repetitive. Why are we doing it this way? Couldn't we just put these all in the same sort of thing? As a matter of fact, you can. It works just the same. So you can put all your rules for tablet size. You could even put like a little tablet rules here. That would work exactly the same. So let's pop this out and see. See, works exactly the same, just like it did before. It doesn't matter to CSS which way you do it. However, one thing that's not so great about this approach is that it can be hard to keep track of what each component in your CSS is doing. So let's say you have a box one component, or maybe you could rename this in a better way. Maybe you could call this sidebar and main content. Let's do that in our HTML just to kind of solidify what's going on here. Let's do main content and then sidebar. And back in our CSS, let's do main-content and .sidebar. Let's put that up there. There we go. That's better. And we just have to change this also over here. Good find and replace will help you a lot when you're doing class naming changes. So notice how you've got main content over here and then more main content rules down here. Now imagine if you had a whole page of styles here, tons and tons of styles, and then at the bottom, you had kind of all those same selectors repeated, but for a different screen size. That might get kind of hard to debug. So one thing that can help is instead of having a tablet rules like this and having them all kind of grouped in one media query, it can help to have these media queries inline so that your CSS looks a little bit more like, let's put this here, main content rules, and then sidebar rules. And I find this a little bit easier to keep track of. So if you have to debug something later on, because a component can be used across multiple pages, like you probably have this main content area across multiple pages in your site. Put div rules up here. Div isn't really a good selector. I would never write this selector in real life. Don't do that. Don't do a selector like this. Divs can be used like all over the place. This is a really bad selector to write. But see how now we can, if we know something's going wrong with the main content, we can kind of see all the places that it might be going wrong. And let's say that on a small desktop size, we want this to be more like a 50-50 ratio. So let's do here and 1024 pixels, 50% here. Pop this out to see what happens. That's 50-50, 2/3, 1/3, and stacked. So media queries can overwrite each other. They follow the same sort of cascade as in CSS. So you're going to be looking to put your mobile styles first. That's where mobile first CSS comes from. Then your next breakpoint up. Breakpoints are where you change your CSS rules. So I'm going to break my CSS breakpoint at 768. And then my next breakpoint is going to be 1024. And again, we're going mobile first and we are just overriding. So what's great about mobile first styles is mobile first styles have all the basic styles for your CSS. It has all your basic typography, your color, etc. And you end up not repeating yourself a lot. And this is why you want to write your CSS this way. So for this class, make sure that you write all of your CSS mobile first. It's very important for performance reasons and also for keeping things nice and tidy. Although it's not required, I would also recommend keeping your media queries inline just because it's a lot easier to debug. And in fact, if you use a preprocessor down the line, such as Sass, that lets you write these inside of the CSS rule, things get even easier than that. And it's just a really good habit to get into. We're not going to cover Sass in this class, which is such a bummer because it's my favorite thing in the world, but maybe we'll get to it towards the end. But for right now, I would recommend keeping these media queries right next to the CSS where they belong with. It'll be so much easier for you to debug later. So that's the basics of writing a media query, where it applies to, and then how to target different widths. There's also max width. So you can say a style shouldn't apply beyond a certain point. So we could change these all to max width and it would apply differently. Give that a try at some point. Media queries can cover all kinds of different situations, but those are the main ones that you'll use them for, min width and max width. So let's say we want the color of the main content, the background, to only be red until we're at, let's say, 500 pixels. If we open this up in a new browser, just resize down, see how we have the red, and then as we grow, it stops. So instead of saying background black, right, that was actually our mobile first rule. And then we said only until 500 pixels, make the background red. So that's an option too. I don't use that one as often, but it can be really handy if you've got just one style that you don't want to keep overriding. You know, that can be really good for just okay, I know for sure I only want this on mobile and no other time ever. That's when you might use max width. That's a good time for that. One other thing you'll notice is that you don't need to include this background rule in the main content rules later in this media screen. It kind of naturally cascades down. So don't rewrite all your rules in your media queries. You don't need to. Just let it go down the page naturally, just like CSS does. So with that, I hope that helps you understand how media queries work and get started with writing them for your own projects. I'm going to follow up with an actual demo of how to do this in the Your Favorite Recipe project. I'll see you in just a moment.